My name is Captain James Caldwell, and I am writing to record everything as clearly as I can. It's June 2025, and I'm stationed in a rugged camp far outside Kabul, Afghanistan. Every day the morning sun hits the dust and grit of our base, and for a moment I pause, thinking of home. The air is thin, the horizon distant, as if the war around me exists in some half-dream. At night, the distant echo of mortars makes the world feel small and hard. But even here, halfway around the world, an email can change everything. I remember the afternoon clearly. I was hunched over my laptop under a beaten army canopy, the faint smell of machine oil and military rations all around. The laptop screen blinked with a new message in my inbox. I hardly recognized the sender, a Washington, D.C. address from a name I barely remembered. The subject line sent a chill down my spine. Urgent notification regarding your immediate family. I clicked it with shaking hands. Outside, insurgents' rockets streaked across the sky, but inside that tent, I felt insulated in suspense. Captain Caldwell, I hope this message finds you under better circumstances. I regret to inform you of the sudden death of your ex-wife, Claire Caldwell. She passed away 2 weeks ago in a car accident. I am writing because during our review of her affairs, we discovered that she had a son, age 3, named Ethan Caldwell. Given that you are the biological father, we need to establish legal guardianship. Please contact social services at Fort Belvoir as soon as possible. Sincerely, Martha Jenkins, social worker, District of Columbia Social Services. I reread the words I could barely comprehend. Your ex-wife Claire died. She had a son, named Ethan. You are the biological father. My mind raced, trying to stitch together a memory. I pictured Claire's face in my head, bright eyes full of warmth. She had told me she couldn't have children. She'd never once mentioned this. Rage bubbled under shock. Claire had hidden this from me. Betrayed me. Betrayed her own child by keeping him from me. I realized then I felt something I hadn't felt in years, something heavier than regret or grief. Raw anger mixed with a gut-wrenching pain. I sat there in silence, staring at the cheap folding table in front of me. The grinding sound of distant generators and the chatter of men sharpening weapons around the camp faded away. In their place was the echo of the email in my mind. The world I had built in my head, the one where Claire was alive and our life together was just paused, was gone. It felt like I was falling through the floor, untethered from everything I thought I knew. For a moment, I couldn't even decide whether to laugh or cry. I felt cold inside, even though sweat ran down my back. When I finally picked up my phone and stared at the blue signal light, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. It was hard to breathe, the air in my lungs feeling like a vice squeezing my chest. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez leaned in, brow furrowed. "Jim, you okay?" he asked quietly. I forced a smile that felt brittle. "Just coffee, Mike. Black." But inside, I was anything but calm. He studied me for a moment and saw the panic in my eyes. "Seriously, man," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I almost shrugged him away, not wanting to explain. What could I say? She's got another kid and I didn't know? Instead, I shook my head and turned. "Family emergency. Gotta go," I muttered. My voice was hoarse. Mike looked confused, but he didn't press. In all the operations we'd been through together, he had never seen me like this. He touched the ridge cap of his rifle thoughtfully and said quietly, "If you need anything, I'm here." I nodded curtly and walked to my tent to pack up. Every muscle in me was numb as I shoved my gear into my pack. I found myself staring at the worn photo pinned inside the lid, Claire and me on our wedding day, both smiling so easily. I rubbed my thumb over the glass. I remembered that day, her warm hand in mine, promising a lifetime. How had this one secret, hidden for so long, come crashing down now? By the time I hoisted my rucksack, I barely felt its weight. I could not focus on anything but the email. The journey back to the United States was a blur of military jets, airport security lines, and too much coffee. On flights and layovers, I stared out the windows. The sprawling sands of the Middle East gave way to bustling airports, those in turn to endless sky. The sound of engines and announcements became white noise, my mind turning each new detail over. She's dead. He's 3. That means this is my son. The words stabbed at me repeatedly. In the air above New York, I caught my reflection in the window and barely recognized the haunted eyes looking back. Betrayal tasted bitter in my mouth as I finally stepped onto American soil. By the time I reached Washington, D.C., jet-lagged and anxious, the humid summer air felt like a bath. I barely had time to drop my bags before a man in a gray suit approached me at Dulles. His bearing was careful, respectful. "Captain James Caldwell?" he asked. When I nodded, he flashed a badge on his chest. "FBI Special Agent Daniel Thompson. Sir, I need a word about Claire Caldwell's accident." My stomach clenched. I followed him to an unmarked sedan in the parking area. Inside, he began questions. When was I married? When divorced? How did I feel about Claire? I answered calmly, carefully, though my heart pounded. He took out a notebook and jotted details. Questions felt formal, but urgent. "Just routine," he assured quietly. Yet I could feel those sharp eyes on me, gauging every tremor. Even after Iraq and Afghanistan, another interrogation still put me on edge. I told him everything I could. We were married, divorced, she's gone, and watched him note each word. Special Agent Thompson gave a small nod. "Thank you for your cooperation, Captain. We're still investigating the accident, but it doesn't look suspicious so far. We'll be in touch." I nodded again, still dazed, and stepped out of the car. A wave of Washington summer heat washed over me, yet I felt cold, like a ghost. I took a moment to collect myself before heading to Fort Belvoir. In the tinted glass of the FBI car, I barely recognized the man staring back. I was wearing civilian clothes now, all black, clean-shaven, for the first time since last deployment, so at least I looked younger. I realized with a pang that any letter or call I'd ignored for months might have been about my own flesh and blood. What kind of soldier was I if I didn't even do that? Guilt pressed on me as I walked into the social services office. Inside a quiet conference room sat a warm-faced woman named Martha Jenkins. She stood up as I entered. "Captain Caldwell," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." Her voice was gentle but businesslike. On the table, in a booster seat, sat my son, 3 years old, with dark curls and wide, curious eyes, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. I froze at the sight of him, the spitting image of Claire, until he looked at me directly. My chest tightened. Ethan blinked sleepily, then smiled a little. He watched me with guarded curiosity. I knelt down slowly to his level, careful not to rush this moment. "Hey, buddy," I managed, voice thick. "I'm James. I'm Ethan's dad." It felt awkward to even say it. His foster mother, Miss Lynn, smiled encouragingly. "Ethan, this is your daddy. He's your real daddy. See?" He looked back and forth between us, trying to make sense. When he crawled into my lap, it felt like putting pieces of a puzzle together. His little arms wrapped around my neck, and he burrowed close. He seemed to sense the truth faster than I could. His fingers curled on my uniform patch. I realized I was still wearing my old army shirt under my jacket. Maybe he felt safer with that familiar scent on me. "That's right, Ethan," I whispered, choking on the words I wished I'd said years ago. "Daddy's here. I missed you so much." Ms. Jenkins introduced herself. "He warmed up as soon as I said you'd be coming. Claire talked about you, said you'd be a good father." I fought back tears. "Claire said that?" I managed, voice shaking. Hearing Claire's voice through others was both a comfort and a fresh wound. "Yes," the social worker said softly. "She was afraid you'd be upset. She just wanted what was best for Ethan." Her eyes softened. It hurt to hear Claire afraid of me, after all we'd shared. They explained everything in calm, gentle detail. Claire had kept her pregnancy secret, maybe out of fear of losing me. After the accident, no other family could be found. Claire's parents had passed. She had no siblings. So foster care took Ethan in until a father came forward. "He's a bright boy," Ms. Jenkins said. "Quite inquisitive." I met his gaze again. "It's good to see you, kiddo," I said softly. I brushed his hair from his forehead. Every bend and curl reminded me of Claire. We made no sudden moves. He seemed content, finally feeling something familiar. We spent the next hour signing papers and filling out forms, home addresses, prior work, medical history, all answered as if briefing a mission. The social worker quizzed me like a duty officer, making sure I could provide a stable home. All the while, Ethan was exploring my pockets, pulling out a penlight and clicking it on and off. He giggled, enchanted by its beam. I didn't stop him. For a moment, the only light in the room was on his smiling face. By the time we left the office, dusk had fallen. I carefully buckled Ethan into a car seat in a rented SUV outside. He was fully awake now and looking around at each new sight. As I drove down the highway, he finally sipped from a bottle of milk and snuggled against me, his small head lulling. The world passed by, and I sang softly to him, a lullaby Claire used to hum. I hadn't realized I was singing until I looked in the rearview mirror and saw his lips move in dream. Later that night, in a small apartment the social services had arranged for me, I finally had a minute alone. Ethan was asleep in a little crib, a pale blue blanket wrapped around him. I stood in the darkened doorway, staring at his peaceful face. I had been taught to kill with precision, to be vigilant at all times. But now I stood wide-eyed at the threshold of parenthood, with no manual. My uniform hung in the closet like a promise of who I used to be. Here, I had nothing but the weight of responsibility on my shoulders and hope in my heart. I sank onto the floor beside the crib and ran a finger over Ethan's tousled hair. His breathing was even and quiet. How do you do this? I wondered. I thought of the war zone I'd just left, the intensity, the clear mission, and realized this was something different, softer, somehow more fragile and more profound. If I could survive explosions and sniper fire, surely I could handle a midnight feeding. But right now, I just needed to watch him sleep. My mind wandered back to when I first met Claire, years ago. We had laughed under a street lamp on a quiet fall night, swearing off military life for that moment and just dancing to a scratchy radio. She had been pregnant once, or so she said, but lost the baby early. I had always blamed the war, blamed myself for leaving her alone, but she never spoke of it after that. I never asked. Should I have? Guilt crept in like oil through water. Every day away from home, every time I stayed silent, I had paid a price. Now I prayed I still had what it took to make things right. Eventually I stood and turned out the light, careful not to wake Ethan. I crawled onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. Sleep was a distant friend. Day's revelation churned in my chest, blending fear and pride in equal parts. I whispered a promise to the darkness, as if Claire could hear it. I will protect him. I will not fail you, Ethan. Not this time. The next morning was chaos, but in a good way. I clumsily prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs shaped like stars to match his t-shirt, and watched Ethan devour them with sticky fingers. He said, "More, Papa," each time I poured another tablespoon of oatmeal. Marshmallows on top, of course. His giggles at the silly shapes on his plate were music, and I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. This little routine, though simple, grounded me. It was as if I were leading a new platoon, with just the two of us against the world. We fell into a strange new normal. Every morning started early with cartoons and cuddles. I would strap on an apron, yes, an army captain with an apron, and make pancakes, tanks for Ethan, butterflies for me, because he insisted. His eyes would light up, and for one moment the burdens of betrayal and grief faded. I realized how rigid I had been. In Afghanistan, I was a commander. Here, I was a comic chef. The irony never failed to make me laugh quietly to myself. Afternoons often meant errands and new adventures. One day I took Ethan to the grocery store, his small feet stepping through the automatic doors. His eyes were wide at every shelf. I let him pick a fruit to taste. He took a bite of an apple and made a funny face. I laughed inside and he laughed too. We had grown-ups behind us looking amused, perhaps puzzled at the soldier so excited by a grocery run, but to me, it was a small miracle, a normal, simple joy that once felt impossible. Bedtime became my favorite and hardest part of the day. We'd sit on his small bed, him clutching a toy soldier in one fist, me holding the bedtime story in the other. I read to him about brave knights and dragons. He listened with rapt attention and often asked questions. He loved a story about farm animals. I never expected to memorize all their names. After the story, I hummed a lullaby from home, one Claire sang to me on lonely nights overseas. Ethan fell asleep to the same tune, and I let him. It was the same tune I wished I could sleep to find calm. Every night I laid him down, I whispered, "I love you, kid." And every night he murmured back, "Love you, Papa," in the innocent way only a toddler can. One day, a home study social worker came through and watched me with Ethan. She played with him on the floor while I vacuumed the living room. Ethan insisted on crawling in front of it, laughing hysterically at the roar. I had to pause the machine to keep him safe. Watching him trust me with that dangerous machine, I realized how my old training helped here too. Risk management on a new battlefield. Afterward, the worker smiled and said, "He seems really happy with you." Relief washed over me like a wave. We had our struggles. I remember the first time I changed Ethan's diaper by flashlight during a storm when the power was out. We both ended up soaked when I missed a step and spilled shampoo everywhere. He screamed at the sudden commotion, and I half panicked, freezing like I would at a sudden explosion. I babbled, "Don't worry, kiddo. I've dealt with worse than shampoo." Eventually, he quieted, clutching a rubber duck. It was a different kind of adrenaline, but the relief when it ended was no less sweet. There was laughter, too. I will never forget the time we made a game out of getting dressed for preschool. I tried to style his clothes like a uniform, little dog tags made from cardboard, a patch that read, "World's Best Dad," and an old cap that he thought was hilarious. Ethan refused shoes until he found ones that looked like little red rockets. We ended up just carrying him downstairs, cape flapping behind him like Superman. And the only march I gave was a proud stride to the car. He also started learning new words at lightning speed, and some brought tears to my eyes. When he first said "Daddy" in a clear voice, right after I helped him tie his shoelace, it felt like winning a battle I never knew I was fighting. I had tears in my eyes, but tried to hide them. "That's it," I said quietly. "Good job, Ethan." He grinned, not knowing he'd just given me one of the greatest moments of my life. School drop-off was a new frontier, too. I brought Ethan to kindergarten like I would escort a diplomat. Brief nod to the teacher, a quick hug to reassure him, and he was off. I parked outside for a minute, remembering how I once leaned against a wall in boot camp, wondering what I was doing there. Now I did the same in the school driveway, but with different stakes. Throughout this time, paperwork continued. I met with lawyers and judges in a mirror to war briefings if ever there was one. Except the stakes were my heart. I recall one long hearing in the courthouse, stiff wooden benches all around, the kind of room where I would have counted coup in Iraq. The judge peered at me over her glasses. "Captain Caldwell, are you prepared to explain why you should be granted custody of Ethan?" she asked. I stood and cleared my throat. Military ceremonies had taught me discipline. I spoke clearly. "Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I never knew I had a son. I am learning every day what it means. Claire was the one I loved, and I miss her. She protected me from danger, and now I vow to protect our son. I can't change the past, but I will build a future for Ethan based on love and truth. He's been through a lot already. He deserves someone who will fight for him." I paused and looked to where Ethan was scribbling with crayons on the corner of a legal pad. Seeing him so calm made me realize how much I needed this. The judge listened quietly, and after what felt like an eternity, she gave a slow nod. The sound of her gavel coming down was softer than any explosion I'd ever heard, but it hit me just as powerfully. We won. Outside the courthouse, Ethan ran into my arms as soon as I scooped him up. He hugged my neck tightly. "We did it, buddy," I whispered in his ear. "We did it." His little arm squeezed me as I carried him to the car. On the ride home, I glanced in the rearview mirror, Ethan with a gummy smile, sleeping peacefully against his favorite teddy. I had tears in my eyes at the sight, thinking how far we had come. In the weeks that followed, our life settled into something precious. I took Ethan to daycare during the weekdays and spent evenings at home with him. On weekends, we did simple things, watched cartoons, built Lego cities, or I'd show him pictures of my army days. I found I could be honest with him. Once, after bath time, he looked up with wide eyes and asked, "Papa, am I your baby?" I knelt to his level and brushed his soft cheek. "You are a sweetheart," I said softly, "and I'll take care of you." He grinned and said, "Good. I love you," as if that explained everything. Though our halls were quiet, they were full of life. His laughter echoed off the walls at dinner time, the walls that once felt like they would collapse under grief, now holding a sense of home. I even planted a small garden in the yard, something Claire had always wanted. Giving Ethan a trowel and letting him drop sunflower seeds into the soil felt strange and right all at once, seeing hope and life grow from tiny beginnings. It reminded me how a soldier can cultivate life after causing destruction. Still, some nights I dreamt of helicopters and firefights, only to wake at Ethan's gentle cry and realize my world had changed. War had taught me to be vigilant against any sound. Now the only alarm I listened to was his baby monitor beeping at 3 a.m. Once I sprinted down the hall like it was a collapsing bunker, only to find Ethan had managed to crawl out of his crib and was babbling happily to a nightlight. I didn't even scold him. I just scooped him up and hugged him tight, promising to get a better gait. The adrenaline was the same, but the relief and love were so much sweeter. Months passed. On Ethan's 4th birthday, I organized a small party with neighborhood kids. I set up a banner that said Captain Ethan's Day. Watching him blow out the candles on his cake, a 2-tier cake iced to look like a blue sky with fluffy clouds, I remembered the anger and pain I felt when I got that email. Tears still pricked my eyes at moments like that, but now they were sweet ones. "Happy birthday," I whispered in his ear as he giggled. "I love you, kid." One warm Saturday, a year and some change after Claire's accident, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took Ethan to visit Claire's grave. The cemetery was quiet and peaceful, birds chirping in the trees. I held Ethan's hand as we walked up to the polished stone. "This is Mommy," I said, voice steady but soft. Ethan tilted his head, looking at the engraved name Claire Madison Caldwell, his small finger tracing the letter C. I knelt down and handed him a fresh bouquet. "We brought these for her," I told him. He gently placed a flower by the base and picked a fallen leaf from the ground, just like he had given me. I hugged him tight and said softly, "Claire loved you so much, Ethan." He patted the stone and didn't cry. I held back mine until we were outside, sitting in the parked car. Then a tear did fall as I looked at his peaceful, sleeping face in the back seat. We had turned our tragedy into something good, and I silently thanked Claire and everyone who helped us for bringing me the son who taught me how to live again. Now, I realized that the hardest battles I faced weren't on distant sands, but here at home. War was brutal, but it was a known enemy. What I faced with Claire's secret and my son was uncharted territory. I faltered. I stepped on landmines of anger and regret. But I found a new kind of strength, one that comes from heart. The uniform might have come off, but every day I wear something even stronger, being Ethan's father. My old army boots sit by the door now, scuffed and worn, waiting like memories of who I used to be. They might march again one day if duty calls, but for now, I am on a different watch. The proudest decorations I wear are the ones unseen, the quiet trust in my son's eyes, his laughter around the table, the sleepy, "I love you, Dad," he murmurs every night. These things no one else can give me. Not medals, not even any medal. As I sit here writing this, Ethan is asleep down the hall, and the house is very peaceful. I feel a calm I never knew in those war tents. I have come so far, from the lonely captain in Kabul to the man tucking his son into bed in Virginia. I won't forget the hard days. My old boots still rest by the door. But I have a new mission now, to be the father Ethan deserves. Tonight, I whisper a quiet thanks to Claire's memory for bringing us together, and to everyone who helped along the way. I have grown, learned to love again, and I will continue to grow. The world may never know our story, but that's fine. We know it, and we will remember it always. I have seen the worst of violence and the best of love. And in the quiet after all the battles, I have found something I fought for without even knowing: peace and family.